Here's the truth nobody in the prepping community wants to admit. 70% of people who call themselves preppers right now won't make it past the first month when things actually fall apart. And I'm not talking about the folks with nothing put away. I'm talking about people with garages full of freeze-dried food, bug-out bags staged at every exit, and enough ammo to supply a small militia. These are dedicated preppers who spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours preparing, and they're still going to fail. Why? Because they've been preparing for the wrong things. I'm Zach, and I've been prepping since 2012. And that time, I've made almost every mistake you can make, spent money on gear I never needed, and learned some hard lessons that completely changed how I approach preparedness. What I'm about to share with you isn't theory from some YouTube expert who's never actually tested anything. This comes from real experience, from talking with people who've survived actual long-term disasters, and from research that'll probably make you rethink your entire prep strategy. Stick with me through this video because I'm going to show you the 5 critical reasons why most preppers fail in the first 30 days, and more importantly, what you need to do differently starting today.
You know that feeling when you're really hungry and you get irritable and can't think straight? Multiply that by 10 and stretch it out for days. That's the reality of acute stress in a survival situation. But here's where it gets worse. After the initial adrenaline wears off, usually around day 4 or 5, that's when the psychological weight really hits. The isolation starts gnawing at you. The uncertainty becomes suffocating. You start second-guessing every decision. Did I bug in when I should have bugged out? Should I ration more strictly? What if this lasts 6 months instead of 6 weeks? And here's the kicker. Even if you have everything you need physically, if your mind breaks, you're done. I learned this back in 2016 when I did my first real bug-in test. I decided to go a full week living like the grid was down. No electricity except what I could generate, no running water except what I had stored, no leaving the property. I thought I was ready. I had done weekend drills before, but by day 3, I was climbing the walls. It wasn't the physical discomfort that got to me, it was the boredom, the monotony, the feeling of being trapped. I caught myself reaching for my phone dozens of times, even though I knew it was off. My brain was literally craving that dopamine hit from checking notifications. That's when I realized most of us are psychologically addicted to our modern comforts in ways we don't even recognize. The preppers who make it past 30 days aren't necessarily the ones with the most gear. They're the ones who've trained their minds to handle discomfort, uncertainty, and isolation. They practice stress inoculation. That's a term from military psychology, and it means deliberately exposing yourself to controlled stressors so you build resilience. Take a cold shower every morning for 2 minutes. It sucks, but it teaches your nervous system to stay calm when you're uncomfortable. Try a 24-hour period of no screens once a month. Feel that anxiety spike when you can't check your phone? That's what you need to learn to manage. Practice making decisions when you're tired, hungry, or stressed, because in a real crisis, that's when you'll need to make your most important choices. Your mind is your first line of defense. Everything else is secondary. If you haven't been training your mental resilience the same way you've been stockpiling food, you're not actually prepared. You're just collecting stuff. Now let's talk about the second reason preppers fail in the first 30 days, physical fitness. And before you click away thinking this is just another lecture about going to the gym, hear me out. Because the reality of physical demands in a crisis is something most preppers completely underestimate.
Here's what the research shows. The average American is simply not physically capable of sustaining that level of activity. We live in a society where the most physical thing most people do all day is walk from their car to their office. According to CDC data, 42% of American adults are obese, not just overweight, obese. If you can't walk up 2 flights of stairs without getting winded, how exactly do you think you're going to handle 12-hour days of manual labor? I see this all the time in the prepping community. Guys with a 100-pound bug-out bag who've never actually carried it farther than from their truck to their garage. People who've spent thousands on gear but can't do 10 push-ups. You know what happens when you try to suddenly switch from a sedentary lifestyle to survival mode? Your body breaks down, fast. We're talking muscle strains, joint injuries, exhaustion so deep you can't function. And in a scenario where there's no urgent care clinic, no physical therapist, no ibuprofen from CVS, those injuries can be catastrophic. Back in 2018, I convinced 3 of my prepper friends to do a weekend training exercise. We were going to hike 5 miles with our bug-out bags, set up camp, spend the night, and hike back. These were all dedicated preppers. Everyone had great gear. 2 of the guys didn't make it past mile 3. One threw out his back. The other's knees were so shot he could barely walk. These were guys in their 40s and 50s who considered themselves prepared. But they'd been preparing with their wallets, not with their bodies. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're overweight, if you're out of shape, if you have chronic health conditions that require daily medication, your window for survival in an extended crisis is dramatically smaller than someone who's physically fit. That's not a judgment. That's just reality. And the good news is you can do something about it right now. You don't need to become a CrossFit athlete or run marathons. You need functional fitness. Start walking. Build up to carrying a loaded backpack. Practice the specific movements you'll actually need. Can you lift a 5-gallon water jug repeatedly? Can you swing an axe for 30 minutes? Can you get up and down from the ground easily? These are the questions that matter.
The time to get in shape is now. While you have access to good food, to medical care if something goes wrong, to all the resources that make fitness achievable. Waiting until the crisis hits to discover you can't physically handle the demands is a fatal mistake. And speaking of fatal mistakes, let's talk about the third reason most preppers won't make it past 30 days: sanitation and hygiene. I know this isn't as sexy as talking about firearms or communication gear, but this is literally life and death. When the toilet stops flushing, that's when people start dying. Let me paint you a picture of what happens in a long-term grid-down scenario. Most people have about 3 days of water stored, maybe a week if they're really diligent. After that, your toilet doesn't flush anymore because municipal water pressure is gone. Where does your waste go? If you're in a city or suburb with a septic system, maybe you're okay for a while if you can manually add water to flush. But what happens when your stored water runs out? What happens when 50 other families in your neighborhood are in the same situation? Within a week, you're dealing with human waste accumulation. Within 2 weeks, that waste attracts flies, rats, and other disease vectors. Within 3 weeks, you're looking at the perfect conditions for cholera, dysentery, typhoid, hepatitis B, and a dozen other diseases that we've essentially eliminated in the developed world because of modern sanitation. These aren't minor illnesses, these are killers, especially when you don't have access to medical care or antibiotics. Let me share something I learned from talking to someone who survived the Balkans conflict in the 90s. He said the thing that traumatized people more than anything else wasn't the violence or the fear. It was the degradation of living without proper sanitation. He described how people would try to bury waste in their yards, but you can only dig so many holes. How the smell became inescapable. How everyone was constantly sick with some kind of gastrointestinal issue. How maintaining any sense of dignity or normalcy became nearly impossible. Most preppers have given zero thought to this. Maybe they've got some toilet paper stockpiled. Maybe they've heard about bucket toilets. But do you actually have a system? Do you have a plan for where human waste goes for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Do you have the supplies you need? A latrine isn't just a hole in the ground. It needs to be deep enough, far enough from your water source, positioned correctly relative to groundwater flow, covered properly to prevent disease vectors, and eventually filled and relocated. This is knowledge our great-grandparents had that we've completely lost. And it's not just human waste. What about your regular trash? In normal times, we generate about 4.5 pounds of garbage per person per day. Where does that go when there's no garbage pickup? Food waste rots and attracts animals, used hygiene products become biohazards, packaging and containers pile up. Without a plan, your survival retreat quickly becomes a toxic waste dump.
Here's what you need to do right now. First, educate yourself on field sanitation. The military has extensive manuals on this because it's a critical skill. Learn about proper latrine construction. Understand how diseases spread through contaminated water and waste.
Second, stockpile the supplies you'll need. Heavy-duty garbage bags, lime or wood ash for covering waste, bleach for disinfection, hand sanitizer and soap, a portable toilet seat that fits on a 5-gallon bucket, cat litter or sawdust for waste management. Third, practice. Yeah, it's gross, but try living for a weekend using only your backup sanitation plan. Find out what works and what doesn't while the stakes are low. Ignoring sanitation because it's unpleasant to think about is like ignoring a leak in your boat because you'd rather enjoy the sunshine. Eventually, you're gonna sink. In a long-term SHTF scenario, sanitation is not optional. It's survival. Now, let me tell you about something that'll completely change how you think about your preps. Because by this point in the video, you're probably realizing that being prepared is way more complex than buying stuff. And you're right. That's why I want to help you out with something practical you can implement immediately. Because I know how overwhelming prepping can feel. You're trying to cover food, water, security, medical supplies, skills, fitness, and on and on. It's a lot. So I put together a completely free guide that cuts through all the noise and gives you a concrete, actionable starting point. It's called How to Turn $50 into a 90-day food supply. And note, that's not a typo, $50. This guide includes the exact shopping list I use, specific brands and prices, 37 essential preparedness items most people never think about, and the simple storage tricks that work even in a small apartment. You'll learn how to make emergency meals with zero cooking fuel, what gas station snacks make perfect barter items, and how to scale from 1 week to 3 months of food security with confidence. This isn't some ebook full of fluff and filler. It's a practical resource I created because I remember how confused and overwhelmed I felt when I first started prepping. I wasted so much money on the wrong things because I didn't have good information. This guide could what I wish someone had handed me on day one. And it's completely free. No catch, no credit card required. Just solid, useful information that you can put into action this weekend. You'll find the link in the description below and in the pinned comment. Go grab it right now, and at least you'll have your food situation handled while you work on everything else. All right, let's keep going because we're about to get into something that might make you uncomfortable. The fourth reason most preppers fail in the first 30 days is operational security, or as we call it in the community, OPSEC. And this is where a lot of people have set themselves up for disaster without even realizing it. Here's the scenario. You've been prepping for years. You're proud of what you've built. You've got a year's worth of food stored. You've got water filtration. You've got backup power. You've invested time and money and effort into being ready. And because you're passionate about it, you've probably talked about it. Maybe you've shown your brother-in-law your setup. Maybe you've posted photos of your preps on social media. Maybe you've mentioned to your neighbors that you're into preparedness. These seem like innocent things. They're not. Let me tell you what happens in the first week of a major crisis. The grocery stores empty out in a matter of hours. We saw this during COVID. We've seen it before hurricanes. People panic and strip the shelves bare. By day 3, people who didn't prepare are getting desperate. By day 7, that desperation is turning into something darker. And who do you think they're going to remember? The guy who's been bragging about his food stockpile. The family who posted their prep pantry on Instagram. The neighbor who mentioned they're ready for anything. You've basically painted a target on your back. You've told desperate people exactly where there are resources. And desperate people do desperate things. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. This is documented reality from every major disaster. New Orleans after Katrina, Bosnia in the 90s, Venezuela during their collapse, Argentina during their economic crisis. The pattern is always the same. The people who advertised their preparedness became targets. Think about it from their perspective. If you had hungry kids and you knew for a fact that the house 3 doors down had food, what would you do? Most people, even good people, will justify things in a crisis that they'd never consider in normal times. This is why OPSEC is critical. But OPSEC isn't just about keeping your mouth shut. It's about thinking through how your preparations might be visible to others. Do you have cases of bottled water visible through your garage window? are your extra trash cans full of empty cans and food packaging that show you're still eating well while everyone else is struggling. When you run your generator, can the whole neighborhood hear it? These are the details that matter. Here's what happened to a guy I know who learned this lesson the hard way. During a regional power outage that lasted about 10 days, he was running his generator to keep his freezer going. Made sense, right? But every house around him was dark and quiet. His was lit up with the hum of a generator. By day 3, he had people knocking on his door asking if they could charge their phones. By day 5, someone tried to steal his generator at night. He ended up having to do armed security shifts, which meant no sleep, which meant he was exhausted and making bad decisions, all because he didn't think through the OPSEC implications of running that generator. Let me give you some practical OPSEC guidelines. First, keep your preparations private. Tell no one except people who are part of your survival group, people you absolutely trust with your life, because that's literally what you're doing. Second, be careful with your online presence. Those photos of your prep pantry or your gun collection, delete them right now. They're searchable, they're permanent, and they're evidence that you have resources others will want. Third, blend in. In a crisis, you want to look like everyone else. Not better off, not worse off, just average. This is called being a gray man. Don't be the house that's obviously doing fine while everyone else is struggling. Fourth, have a cover story. If someone asks directly if you have supplies, have a believable answer ready. Something like, "We've got a few days of food, but we're getting worried too." You're not lying about having nothing, you're deflecting. Fifth, prepare for security. This doesn't necessarily mean guns, though that's part of it. It means reinforced doors. It means window security film. It means motion-activated lighting that doesn't require grid power. It means having a plan for how you'll defend your home if you need to. The goal isn't to become paranoid. The goal is to be realistic about human nature under stress. Good people do bad things when they're desperate, and advertising that you have what they need is asking for trouble. Your security strategy should be that no one knows you have anything worth taking. Now let's talk about the fifth and final reason most preppers won't make it past 30 days. And this one ties everything else together. It's lack of realistic testing. Most preppers are preparing for a fantasy version of SHTF, not the reality. And the only way you find out the difference is by actually testing your plans. I see this constantly. People buy a water filter and throw it in their closet. Never use it, never test it, just assume it'll work when needed. People have bug-out bags packed with gear they've never actually used in field conditions. People have evacuation plans they've never rehearsed with their families. People have food stored that they've never actually tried to live on. And then, when a real emergency hits, they discover all the gaps in their planning. Let me tell you what happened to me in 2019. I thought I had my food storage dialed in. I had done all the calculations, I had a good rotation system, I figured I was good for at least 6 months. Then I decided to actually test it by eating only from my storage for 2 weeks. It was a disaster. First, I discovered I'd way overestimated my calories. I was constantly hungry. Second, I found out that I was missing key ingredients to make my stored food actually edible. I had rice and beans, but no way to season them adequately for weeks of eating. Third, I learned that some of the stuff I'd stored I didn't actually like enough to eat meal after meal. That freeze-dried whatever that seemed fine as a camping meal was absolutely miserable as a daily staple. But here's the thing. I learned all of this during a test when I could easily go to the grocery store if I needed to. Imagine learning those lessons during an actual crisis, when there's no backup plan. That's the situation most preppers are setting themselves up for. Testing reveals the gaps in your planning. It shows you what you've forgotten. It teaches you which skills you actually need to practice more. It builds the muscle memory and confidence you'll need when it really matters. But most people never do it because testing is uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. It disrupts your normal life, which is exactly why it's so valuable. Here's what real testing looks like. Start small. Do a 24-hour power outage drill. Turn off your main breaker and live like the grid is down. Can you cook a meal? Can you keep your phone charged? Can you stay warm or cool? What did you forget? What didn't work like you expected? Write it all down and fix the problems. Then, scale up. Do a weekend bug-in scenario where you only use your stored resources. No cheating, no running to the store. Live on your preps. Use your backup water. Cook with your alternative methods. See what a weekend of that actually feels like. I guarantee you'll learn a dozen things you didn't know.
Test your bug-out bag by actually carrying it on a realistic hike, not a quarter mile, multiple miles over varied terrain. Does the weight distribution work? Are your boots comfortable after hour 3? Can you actually access what you need without unpacking everything? These are details you only learn by doing. Practice your skills under stress. Can you start a fire when you're cold and tired? Can you purify water when you're in a hurry? Can you render first aid when someone is bleeding and panicking? Knowing something intellectually is completely different from being able to execute under pressure. Here's a test most people never think about. Do a communication drill with your family. You're at work, your spouse is at home, your kids are at school. A major emergency happens. Can you actually reach each other? Do you have backup ways to communicate if cell phones are down? Do you have a rally point everyone knows about? Have you actually practiced this, or is it just a conversation you had once? The people who make it past 30 days aren't the ones with the most expensive gear. They're the ones who've actually tested their plans and skills repeatedly. They've learned what works and what doesn't through experience, not theory. They've made their mistakes in practice when the stakes were low. They've built real competence, not just confidence based on YouTube videos and stuff they've bought. Testing is the difference between collecting gear and being prepared. It's the difference between having a plan and knowing your plan works. It's the difference between hoping you'll be okay and knowing you'll be okay because you've already done it. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one aspect of your preparedness this month and actually test it. Not in your head, not by watching another video. Actually do it. Live it. Experience the reality of what you're preparing for. Find the gaps, fix them, then test something else next month. Build actual competence through repeated practice. Because here's what I've learned in over a decade of prepping. The gear matters less than you think. The skills matter more than you think. And the mental and physical preparation matter most of all. Most preppers won't make it past 30 days, not because they don't have enough stuff, but because they haven't built themselves into the kind of person who can thrive in that environment. You can have a warehouse full of supplies, but if you mentally break down from isolation and stress, you're done. You can have the perfect plan, but if your body can't handle the physical demands, you're done. You can have everything you need, but if you've advertised it to everyone around you, you're done. You can have every piece of gear, but if you've never tested it, you don't actually know if you're prepared.
Real preparedness is about becoming resilient as a human being. It's about building mental toughness so you can handle uncertainty and discomfort. It's about getting physically fit so your body won't fail you. It's about thinking strategically about security and OPSEC. It's about understanding that sanitation and hygiene are just as critical as food and water. It's about testing and proving your capabilities so you know, not hope, that you'll be okay. Look, I get it. This video probably isn't what you expected. You probably wanted me to talk about the best bug-out location, or which guns to buy, or how much ammo to stockpile. And those things matter, but they're not what determines who makes it and who doesn't in the first 30 days. What determines that is all the stuff we've talked about today. The stuff that's harder to buy, harder to talk about, harder to show off on social media. But it's the stuff that actually keeps you alive. If you found this valuable, do me a favor and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Too many people in our community are focused on the wrong things, and I want to change that conversation. Also, if you haven't grabbed that free food storage guide yet, the link is in the description below. It's a concrete first step you can take today to improve your situation. Turn $50 into 90 days of food security. That's a pretty good return on investment. And if you got value from this video, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because I'm going to keep bringing you real,
untested, practical information based on actual experience, not just theory. I'm going to keep calling out the myths and misconceptions in the prepping community because I want you to actually be prepared, not just feel prepared. Remember, the goal isn't to have the most gear. The goal isn't to be ready for every possible scenario. The goal is to build yourself into someone who's resilient enough to handle whatever comes, someone who's mentally strong, physically capable, strategically smart, and practically skilled. That's the kind of prepper who makes it past 30 days. That's the kind of prepper who thrives no matter what happens. Thanks for watching. Stay prepared, stay smart, and I'll see you in the next one.